You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You have my sword.
And you have my bow.
And my trowel.
Hi, you're listening to episode 31 of And My Trowel, where we look at the fantastic side of archaeology and the archaeological side of fantasy. I'm Tilly.
And I'm Ash.
And in case you're wondering what happened at the end of our last episode, no chit-chat, no blabbering today, we're just going to get straight into it. So this is our current situation. A gleam of silver catches your eye on the corner of a dusty shelf. You find yourself drawn inexorably towards it. You can't help yourself. Something deep inside seems to take hold of you, and before you know it, your hand is reaching forwards, fingers outstretched. Luckily, the anti-charm alarm goes off, and the sudden freezing blast of air wakes you from your trance just in time. You snatch your hand back from the bookshelf, and you turn away.
Oh, Tilly, I didn't know you were an expert on magical jewellery.
I'm not, actually. To be perfectly honest with you, I just really wanted to review that nice little scenario. But I find them really, really fascinating. However, luckily, I know someone who is an expert on magical jewellery. I would like you to meet archaeologist, Egyptologist, general historian, especially jewellery historian, who also happens to have researched the history of magical amulets. Kind of. We'll talk about that later. Dr Sigrid van Roode.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Amazing. Welcome, Sigrid. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So I love that between this podcast and my other podcast and also the book club that Ash and I are admins of, we managed to just persuade everyone to come. Because you may recognize Sigrid from an episode on silver from Tea Break Time Travel, which, yes, but she, as you may have heard, if you listen to that episode, she is indeed an expert on sort of magical amulets or the symbolism of magic and that kind of spirit possession. First of all, also have to say congratulations, because since that episode, you are now Dr. Bling.
I am. Thank you.
Yay.
That to me is magic in itself. It actually happened.
Well, congratulations. And indeed, your thesis, I can't remember now. What was the title of your thesis?
Silver of the Possessed.
There you go.
Ooh.
I mean, if that isn't appropriate, I don't know what.
I want to read it.
It is. I think you can. Am I right in thinking you can read it for free online, Sigrid?
Absolutely. And not even read it. You can also download it and have your very own copy for free.
Okay, that's what I'm doing right after that.
We'll put the link in the show notes in case anyone else also wants to do the same. But so I introduced you as, well, you do all kinds of different things, but your sort of main role, shall we say, is a jewellery historian. What exactly is a jewellery historian?
Well, we could fill a podcast on that, but the way that I consider what a jewelry historian does is I look at jewelry as material culture, of course, like an archaeologist would look at, well, anything tangible. I use jewelry as a lens sort of to study the people that made it, that wore it. So it's not really like art historian, but really more like an archaeologist, but then with blingy things.
Blingy things. Is that a technical term?
Yeah.
Highly technical.
So if I look at your thesis and I like type in blingy things and I search
It'll
for
come
it,
up.
well, there'll be
like
lots and lots of blingy things.
1,000 different things. You're like, oh God, I have to go through all of the blingies.
I want to see all the bling.
And is there a particular kind of jewellery that you're focused on?
Mainly it's traditional jewelry from North Africa and Southwest Asia. So jewelry from the last, say, 150 years or so. But I'm also an archaeologist. So I also work with archaeological jewelry. And as you can hear, I'm Dutch. And I also do a lot with my own traditional jewelry. I just last week hosted a conference with two other friends of mine on mourning jewelry from actually the UK, the United States and Western Europe, which was also absolutely fascinating.
By mourning, I assume you mean MOURN,
Yes.
not MORN.
Yeah, no, not the jewelry that we done in the morning.
Done during mourning period.
Yes.
And by that you mean sort of, what is mourning jewelry?
Is that the stuff with like hair in?
Well, it's what you would wear when you are in mourning. or to commemorate a deceased person. And yes, it has hair and sometimes teeth, and it's the jet mourning jewelry and all sorts of types that we discussed on our very first symposium, which was, you could do another podcast on that. Yes,
totally.
That'd be cool.
Let's do one. Hair jewelry. Sounds good.
Yeah. Are you going to come back on? Talk about it.
How could I so?
We've already had one guest make a return visit, so I feel like everyone has so much interesting stuff to say. It's inevitable for multiple ones.
So why is it so important to study jewelry?
For me, I'd say it is because jewelry is often overlooked as a historic source. So people will see it as something decorative, as adornment, and you will see it in these beautiful, gleamy showcases. But it actually has much more to tell. So that's why I think it's important to study jewelry, because you wear it on your person and it's meant to be seen by other persons. So it's incredibly powerful as a communication tool almost. So that's why I think it's way more important to study jewelry as material culture and a historic source than just as something that we throw on to look pretty.
Yeah, it's almost like a signal of identity, isn't it?
Very much so, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favourite piece of jewelry, Ash?
Oh, I do, actually. So I have two what I wear all the time. I never take them off, I suppose. They're not archaeological, they're mine. They're mine, no one's having them.
From the exhibition I was on. They were just so pretty. So, archaeologists and not tomb robbers or grave diggers, however much people might think that we are. Or treasure hunters.
No. So I have this charm bracelet, and honestly, I would never ever really wear a charm bracelet, but my grandparents bought me it, and when I was leaving the house, essentially, I was leaving for university, and they bought me like one every year after that. And then when my granddad died, my nan continued on doing that, and like now my mum has taken it on. So like I have like a little charm for like a suitcase for moving away, and like I have a little Viking because I studied archaeology, and then I got a graduation cap, and I've got like a little tiny Groot things like that for my 30th. Yeah, it says I am Groot on the back, and it's very cute. He's a little plant pot.
I mean, that is the ultimate identity. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
then
I have a clattering as well. So clattering, yeah. So
with the heart and the
hands. Yes. That my partner got me when we were first going out, and I don't ever take it off. So my finger is literally like welded to this ring.
I have the same problem,
Yeah, it has like, it's broken in the back from all the maticking I've done in the past, and like the troweling, and I just never would take it off. And obviously I clean it, but like, and so it's mine. Yeah. Those are my favorite pieces of jewelry that I wear constantly.
Oh, that's so lovely, Ash. Maybe you're sentimental now. I'm now looking at mine going, I just thought these were pretty. They don't really have much meaning to them.
Well, I suppose that is meaning to you as well, because it's pretty and you want to, and it's also your identity, isn't it? Because you pick stuff that you want to express yourself with. Yeah. Like I necessarily wouldn't express myself through the charm bracelet, but it's mine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a similar one to you. My thumb is completely warped because I have a ring, which actually, to be fair, my now husband bought me. It was his first ever Christmas present that he bought me it's made from a fork. So it's like a twisted fork.
Oh, cool.
And I've had it on my thumb then for the last, we've been together nearly 14 years now, so 13 years it's been on my thumb, which, as you can imagine, has made a bit of a physical indentation on it.
It does have meaning, see?
It does, there you go. It does have meaning. So yeah, and all my other ones are sort of very random, nice ones that I like. But I feel, of course, Sigrid, do you have a particular, I mean, every time I see you, you seem to be wearing different kinds of amazing jewelry, but do you have any that you always wear? Do you have any that are your go-to?
No, actually, because I love jewelry too much. I have so many pieces that carry meaning to me. But for my PhD graduation, I got a ring from my mother. And this is actually a family piece because my mother used to be a teacher. And from her very first salary, she purchased a ring, a traditional Dutch ring with coral. It's made of gold. And she gave that as a present to her mother. Now, for me, when I got my first salary, I bought a purse for me. So, altruism, not me. So she gave that to her mother, my grandmother. My grandmother continued to wear it until she died. Then it returned to my mother. And now I got it for my PhD. And that is incredibly meaningful to me. I mean, it's not old or anything, but it's fabulous. It's family piece.
Which I feel like those are always the things with jewelry, though, right? Even if it's, I mean, it might also look nice because indeed it's jewelry. So it's, probably, like you say, it's ornamentation. But so much of it is related to the feeling it invokes and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which, going back then too, sorry, I got a bit sidetracked. So in terms of the study of jewelry, I mean, for example, like, what are you working on right now? Like, what actually, what are the sort of areas or the topics that you study when you look at the jewelry?
Well, right now I'm working on a talk that I'm going to be giving in 2 or 3 weeks' time on a conference on amulets, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Perfect timing then.
The capacity of jewelry as an amulet, because it's so powerful. I think that's my favorite topic in jewelry research, to figure out its meaning to the person that wore it.
Yeah, which, as we've just said, is very personal.
Yeah, but it can also be supernatural. So you have to dive in this entire world of the unseen and rituals and informal rituals and magic. And that is really my favorite world.
So, Sigrid, what's the most exciting aspect of your research, do you think?
For me, that is meeting the person behind it. So when the individual shines through. So when you have an amulet, for example, that someone has tried to disable, sometimes you see that an amulet has been annulled by damaging it or striking things through. And then I'm like, what were you trying to do here? Or an amulet that has very clear patina of wear, the use wear traces. Have you been fumbling with that a lot? How did you feel? That, I think, is the most exciting part. And of course, when I figure out what in particular amulet or piece of jewelry was actually used for. So when I see the person behind it, I suppose.
That's cool. The biography.
Yeah. Which I guess is the ultimate. I mean, that's what's so nice about archaeology and history, I guess, as well, is not just seeing the objects as objects, but seeing the objects as a representation of someone.
Exactly that. Like alterations and, you make this bigger, what does that tell us about you? Or it has been downsized or resized or, forged together with another piece. It's that these changes I find fascinating, really.
That is cool. And so the biggest question we're going to ask you is, do you enjoy reading fantasy?
Well, this is probably the part where you're going to kick me out of your podcast. Because maybe not so much.
Right off. Let's cancel this
guys. We're going to have to stop
thing.
this podcast recording. You can read Sigrid's book. It's fine.
Bye.
No, seriously, it depends. It depends, because I like fantasy. When I was a child, for example, I could get lost in dream worlds in which all sorts of magical things happen. And I still love that kind of book, but you will not see me plowing through Lord of the Rings. I'm sorry, listeners, you're all going to hate me. I adore the movies and the different interpretations of it. I like the science behind Lord of the Rings, but I haven't read it cover to cover yet. So there you go. Oh dear.
Oh my God, pass me the smelling salt.
It's okay. I'll waft this fan for you a little bit. But I mean, to be fair, it sounds like your work is heavily involved with kind of fantastical elements. So I suppose it's if you want to lose yourself from work, you're not going to read fantasy because that's your work.
Well, it is true that my reality sometimes is so strange with diving all in all of these informal rituals that people actually practice and beliefs that they actually have. Maybe I don't need fantasy. Yeah. But maybe I do, and I just don't know what I'm missing. That could also be the case.
Maybe. Have you heard of this author? His name...
Here we go.
I may have mentioned it once or twice.
I thought it was going to come later, much later in these episodes, but no.
If Sigrid hasn't listened to our previous episode, she's going to be so confused right now. Although I feel like we've done enough together, Sigrid, that you probably know about my obsession with Terry Pratchett and Discworld at this point.
Well, here I can be actually, yes, Terry Pratchett. I read his book pyramids, and I loved it. Loved it. Totally.
Vindication!
I think I'll just leave right now.
It's fine. It's all good. You can continue, Sigrid. That's fine.
Oh, thank you, God.
It is a very good one, pyramids. I very much appreciate that one. About Egyptology, so, or
yeah, fair enough.
Egyptology adjacent. So I guess, that would be
Had to read that. Had to read it.
Oh, I mean, everyone has to read it. Anyway. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today on our little quest. And before we continue...
Hang on. What was that thump?
A thump? Oh, it's probably that pigeon again. I don't understand why the postman doesn't just upgrade to a new one. That old pigeon should definitely retire at this point.
Okay, I'll get the water, you fetch a blanket. Listener, we'll be right back.
Okay, the pigeon has recovered and he's on his way again.
Here's hoping he gets his well-earned retirement soon.
Agreed. But before we were interrupted, we had just finished chatting to Sigrid a little bit about her kind of background, what she researches, what a jewelry historian actually does. So perhaps now, if we want to kind of look at this amulet, which hopefully, Sigrid, you'll be able to help us with that a little bit. It sounds like you're well qualified.
I will be very happy to. Love amulets.
Excellent. But usually when we start our kind of research process, we like to do a bit of a literature review, see what we already know about it. Now, you mentioned you're not as keen on fantasy, so perhaps you're not quite so able to help us with this section. But are you aware of any kind of books that have featured a magical amulet or sort of some other item of magical jewelry? Fictional books, we mean by this point.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because, well, of course, there is Lord of the Rings. I mean, the title is kind of the clue
Of course,
here.
yeah.
And there is this book which I read as a child, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was titled, but that was about two kids who were living on a sort of estate, and they found magical bracelets with which they could bring the stone statues of lions outside the estate to life, and then they would take them on all sorts of trips and through other realms, and that was fantastic. I loved that a lot. And there is a lot of fiction, of course, in world literature on magical jewelry. Like, did you know that King Solomon, for example, also had a magical ring?
I think I did know that. I think I had heard that. But what was the magicness of it, or the magical ability of it?
It allowed him to command the armies of jinn, of spirits.
Useful. Very useful.
I mean, that is very useful.
Because that's interesting, actually, because when you mentioned the one with the bracelets as well, and because I feel like a lot of children's fiction involves some kind of magical jewelry item. Usually, indeed, it's a child finds, like the one that I found a good example of is the Enchanted Castle by E. Nesbit, which is like an all-powerful ring where basically the kids work out they can do anything with it. And of course, being kids, use it for completely the wrong things, and then shenanigans ensue, shall we say. But like, it's interesting that a lot of them, it seems to have a very specific purpose.
Yeah, they do. And specifically, well, when you look at rings, of course, you find these throughout the world as magical objects. And that is something that fascinates me. Oh, the similarity in beliefs that surround these pieces.
Which, I mean, makes you think, if there's that much linkage around the world, surely there's some truth in it. Like, maybe
Must
there
be.
were magical
Must
rings.
be.
At some point.
Maybe it was Middle Earth.
Maybe we were Middle Earth. Wasn't that the whole point? That, like, actually he was trying to write a history of our world, J.R.R. Tolkien. So it's actually that the Middle Earth as we know it is indeed like hundreds of thousands of years ago or something.
Yeah, he's trying to make a mythology. I think because even he doesn't know where half these things come from, which I love. I always love that because everyone's arguing and like he's like, yeah, I could, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely frantically making notes in the background. That's a great idea.
Like the appendices are so thick in the Silmarillion, and you're just like, there's so much stuff to it.
I admit I've never read the Silmarillion because I've got to the first chapter or two in and then just give up because Yeah.
It's dense.
It's dense. It's a bit too dense for me. Anyway, but yeah, so okay. So you had unknown one. If anyone knows that one who's listening in about the kids with bracelets, please do write
Let us
in. I'd
know.
be very curious to know about it because, yeah, I think if we typed in children magical jewelry book, there'd be so many coming up. It would be impossible to find.
And also, this is a book of like 40 years ago. It's almost like an ancient grimoire by now.
Yeah, no, but that's fair enough. How about you, Ash? Have you read any books that feature magical amulets?
I immediately thought of The Witcher.
They do have magic jewelry as well.
So they have, The Witcher has these medallions. So every single Witcher gets a silver medallion with this Witcher's profession. So, and what school they represent. So the school of the wolf, and they get it after they do the trial of grasses from the kind of magical forge, Kaer Morhen and stuff. And essentially what will happen is when you're close to those who have magic or your like curses and charms and spells, the medallion will shake.
Oh, is that the whole, like in the Witch TV series as well? That's like he's got the wolf on his.
Yes, that's him. So he's the School of the Wolf. You can get it's like Skull of the Cat, Skull of the Bear. I can't remember the other one now.
School of the Cat sounds a little less like if you've got School of the Wolf, School of the Bear, School of the Pretty Cat.
I can't remember which schools though. I'll have to hang on. I want to see the other ones now. Okay, so you've got, you might not like these. School of the Wolf, School of the Cat, School of the Griffin, the Bear, Viper, Manticore, and Crane.
Crane? Sorry.
Crane, okay.
Although
because you've got a different type of fighting style. That's essentially.
And I guess the crane is considered magical in some places, right? Like it's got that mythology associated with it.
But the thing is with these medallions is they're not foolproof, right? So certain creatures, it won't shake, it won't alert you to the creature. So that's like Dopplers, which are kind of these like, I don't know, weird mimic doubles, and then hive vampires as well. So if you have a hive vampire around you, you won't know.
That's a bit useless then, really.
No, it's quite good for genies and mages and like every other curse ever. And if someone's gonna just like send a spell to you, and then he can, react and do his own signy signs and stuff. But yeah, so that's what I immediately thought of was the medallions in Witcher.
And it's interesting because that's then a sort of, it's not that they necessarily do anything, like you can't use them for something, it's more that they're just as a warning then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're a representation of the school of who you're in. So if you are a Witcher, you know who they are and where they trained and how they trained and maybe who trained them. So there's an identity thing there. But then, yes, they also do help to kind of alert the Witcher of magical creatures nearby that are going to kill them.
Which I guess is another kind of amulet or piece of jewelry from fantasy fiction is the protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which also exists a lot in history and in that kind of thing as well, which we'll get into a little bit next episode in a bit more detail. But you reminded me, so one thing that Sigrid already mentioned, the Lord of the Rings and the One Ring, of course, being kind of the ultimate fantasy magical jewelry item. And I was thinking about, what about Arwen's like Evenstar necklace? Because that's, very much like it represents her immortality and, So I was looking it up because I couldn't quite remember the name and I was trying to work it all out. And apparently that's not actually in the books, which I didn't really think about. And I was like, it's not in the books at all. It was just added into the film to add a bit more character and make Arwen basically a bigger character in the film because she
have a part.
Yeah, have some women in the film rather than the book. So apparently it was inspired by the Elf Stone, which is then a gem that's set into a brooch given to Aragorn by Galadriel, and the stone is also known as Elisar, which is where he gets his name. So that's why he's called Elisar by the elves. Which, anyway, little fun fact there. But because it's just so funny because that's such a iconic piece of jewelry from the films now.
Yeah, it's even in the merchandise.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny how even objects that potentially then don't even have that magical association, they're just sort of imbued with it through people thinking that they do.
And people get it tattooed on them as well.
Yeah.
They do?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, wow.
It's Lord of the Rings, and it was like, it is now Lord of the Rings, and it's like the symbolism between Arwen and Aragorn, like their love and her giving up her immortality for him and things like that. So I think people, they do. They get it tattooed
Strong
on them.
message. I mean, it is a very pretty design as well. So
It is lovely.
It does take that. But I was trying to think of other books that I've read that feature kind of magical amulets and things. And the only one I could think of is the Amulet of Samarkand, which I'd completely forgotten about. It's by Johnathan Stroud. And it's a kid's book about a demon that's summoned. Like, because basically this kid wants to screw things up, and so he summons a demon, and again shenanigans ensue.
Of course.
Let's put it that way. And it involves this magical amulet called the Amulet of Samarkand, which I couldn't quite remember what exactly this amulet does. I think it's another one of these ones that it's just kind of a powerful magical amulet. Like,
is it not like
vague.
a defensive one? Probably,
yeah, I think so. But like the government's trying to get hold of it and all this kind of stuff. So I think that there is probably some attack power in it as well. It's one of those things, people could use it for good, but actually, they'll use it.
Can you summon the demon and like have it attack people? Because that's quite useful.
Well, it's separate. The demon summoning was separate to the amulet.
Oh.
So it was, as they would try to steal it. He got the demon to steal the amulet.
Oh,
Spoiler.
Right, okay.
Sorry. But that's not the main plot of the book. Like, there's a lot of other stuff that happens, but I can just remember reading that. And I think that was one of the first sort of proper fantasy ones that I read in that respect. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And that sort of got me thinking about more things. But I was curious how, because I mean, like we've mentioned, the Lord of the Rings is just such a classic fantasy. So much other fantasy since then is so inspired by or based by Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings fantasy. But I mean, Sigrid, you mentioned that, these books that you were reading were also a little older in relation to those things. So, I mean, how has actually the concept of magical jewelry developed over time? Like, what would the modern magical jewelry be in comparison to the traditional magical jewelry from fantasy?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, over time, I think you see the same concepts over and over again. So you have an object, a jewel, that either gives you power or gives you power over others or keeps evil away. So these three things, I think what it does changes over time, because you were just saying like the government was after this Amulet of Samarkand. Well, in older stories, like the one that I remember reading, The Kids with the Bracelets, it's kids going on adventures, but they were not summoning demons or anything. It was really a very nice and sweet and sort of escapist kind of book.
Yeah.
Maybe I think the concept in what we see that jewelry does changes along with our own worldview, if that makes any sense. So the things that we want get bigger or different than they were in the past, but we still need an object to make that happen. And that would be the amulet. So I think the theme remains the same, but what we do with it changes over time. Is this ring when we go back in time, like the Germanic sagas of the god Odin, he also had a ring, which is one that I would, by the way, really want to get my hands on, the Draupnir ring, because it made little rings of itself. I want
it's like the Hydra of rings.
Yeah. Why did it make little rings of itself?
This I should remember, but I don't.
But that's... Yeah, I mean, it's good for Christmas and stuff, right? Like,
I mean, if Sauron had that ring,
oh my God,
let's not.
A problem solved.
Let's not go there.
I don't need Celebrimbor. It's fine.
It's all good. You do your thing. I'll just be here with my ring, making its little rings.
Okay, so I looked it up here. Yes. Oh, so get this: every 9th morning,
well, yeah,
the Draupnir ring would make 8 new rings.
Okay.
Not 9? How annoying.
No, because they were together, they would be 9.
They would be 9, yes.
It's like the blue fence post problem I was talking about before we started recording. Anyway.
Yeah.
Cataloguing them will be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, there's more.
That's literally the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. But what do you do with the rings?
That it doesn't say. It just said, well, there are 8 new rings coming every 9th morning, so there should be thousands, millions of them by now.
Yeah, and then you sort of like, well, I'm just sort of bored of these rings now.
Yeah.
It's like those, when the sort of genie asks, oh, what do you want? And you say, oh, everything I, touch becomes gold. And then you soon realize, oh, I could really do with just a sandwich, but, I can't eat it anymore. It sounds like one of those kind of wishes that you're like, yes, I want every 9 days to have a new 8 rings. And then you realize, oh, actually.
Yeah, but he also placed it, Odin, I see, on the funeral pyre of his son Balder, the god of spring that was murdered. And then the Raupnir was placed on that body. So maybe it's gone by now. I really should know, but I don't.
I mean, to be fair, Odin's a tricky one. We never really
He's a
keep
tricky,
up with
tricky
Always a
guy.
tricky one. Yeah.
Always looking at you through ravens and
Maybe
things.
it's representative of spring, like the constant rejuvenation every 9 days kind of thing of new life. And
Yeah, that would go with the circular and cyclical,
go.
cyclical nature of life. Like the Ouroboros also is this mythical ring of the tail biting its own snake. Again, sorry, snake biting its own tail. Have another cup of coffee. Hello.
Yeah, and I like that idea as well of it being sort of, it's not even necessarily the jewelry itself all the time. It's like the jewelry itself doesn't even have to do anything. It's the representation of it that also is sort of seen as important, which I quite like, I have. So of course, I have to also squeeze in some Terry Pratchett reference at some point. Of
course you do.
Because I was realizing that actually there's not that many magical amulets and magical ring. There's sort of occasional references to the Lord of the Rings throughout it, done in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way. But there's a couple of rings and things, but they're always indeed considered representational, because I like that a lot of the magic in the Discworld is sort of not actually overt magic necessarily. It's just kind of headology, it's called. So it's basically trying to make people believe that you can do the magic, even if you aren't actually doing the magic.
Brilliant.
So one of my favorite quotes is from Weird Sisters about Margaret Garlick, who's one of the witches. And it's the clusters of amulets, magical jewelry, and occult bangles on various parts of her body jingled together. And any enemy wouldn't only have to be blind to fail to notice that a witch was approaching. He'd have to be deaf as well. Like, it's the idea that, like, this is me. I'm a witch. Look at all these amulets and magical jewelry and bangles and things. It's like, actually, no, none of them do anything. But it looks very witchy.
Costume jewelry-esque.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But and you also have Lord Vetinari, who's the tyrant of Ankh-Morpork. He has a ring made of stygium, which is a jet black material that basically, if it is heated or if it's in the light, it suddenly burns like white hot. So it's sort of considered a thing. If you have a ring made of stygium, you're sort of playing with risk, and you're very strong-minded because you could really hurt yourself, but you don't because you're careful. It's like this whole thing, and but it's no one believes that it's actually made of stygium. They think that it's just a show, but then in one of the books it turns out it is. Which
Oh no. All this talk of magic rings has just reminded me. We were supposed to deliver that dwarfish chainmail to the museum this morning because it's the exhibition tomorrow.
Oh, even so, I completely forgot. Do we still have time?
Yes, but we have to leave now. We have to go now.
Okay, right. So, sorry, everyone. We're going to have to cut short this episode of Am I Trowel, but don't worry. We'll be continuing next episode with part 2 of our chat with Dr. Sigrid van Roode, and we'll be getting into the archaeology of things. In the meantime, as always, please do follow, like, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support the APN even more tangibly, you can also become a member and get access to early release episodes, bonus recordings, all kinds of fun swag, etc. All contact information, as well as more information on the points discussed today, can be found in the show notes.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Culturo Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Rachel Roden.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.